cringy because nothing says I love you like death. Not my bag. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Kelsey. I'm the creator of Bite-Sized Ancient History and a recent graduate of Cambridge University. At university, I studied classics and then Egyptology, so I decided to start a YouTube series that can kind of use that knowledge to the best of its ability and review historical films, discussing whether it's historical fact or historical fiction. If this sounds like the kind of content that you might be interested in, don't forget to like the video if you like it and subscribe. And don't forget to check out my other social media channels. Today, I think, is the 6th video in this series, so don't forget to go check out my other ones because today we're going to be discussing the film Pompeii. Because this isn't an overly famous film, I'm going to be attaching spoiler warnings when there's any major plot twists. Obviously when it's a film set in ancient Pompeii, there's one key plot point that you know it's going to happen. I'm now just going to provide a very short description of its genre and a plot summary, so you can kind of get the vibes of if this is a film that you actually want to watch before you finish this video. I would personally class it as like a romance/disaster movie. And while I'm not here to diss any films, it personally was not up my street. It wasn't my thing. It felt a little bit cringy most of the time. It kind of felt like it had the dialogue of a teen drama with adult plot points, so it was really bizarre. But it could be up your street. If you're into romance and disaster movies, I think you would really enjoy it. It's just not my bag. With that said, I'm going to preface now that I'm not here to slander the movie from this point. I'm just going to be talking about if it's historical fact or historical fiction. And again, I'm not judging the value of the film by how accurate it is. I'm just going to discuss why I think they may have made changes and when they've stayed very true to historical record. If you've seen any of my other videos, you know the drill by now that I'm going to try and do a speed summary of the plot so that we can just get into the historical stuff, for want of a better word. You know what I mean. So 3, 2, 1, let's go. The movie starts in 62 CE in Britannia, i.e. Britain. We see Roman soldiers fighting with a Celtic horse tribe, and this is when we meet our principal character, but just a tiny little fetus under the age of 10. I'm not good with children's ages. He's young. But anyway, that's when we meet him. Our main character is called Milo, and we see both his parents pretty brutally killed in front of him. I think his dad gets stabbed while he's fighting, and then his mum, you think, is fine in saving him and gets taken out by a horse, just gone. And then she gets captured by the soldiers, and then I think they literally slit her throat in front of Milo. So it's pretty traumatizing. And like his parents, the rest of the tribe goes the same way. Milo is the only survivor as he fakes his death and hides amongst their bodies in a pile. It's really grim. After he thinks the Roman soldiers have left, he begins to escape. However, he gets caught by a gang of outlanders. They then take him in as a slave. The film then flashes forward 17 years. And we're now in Londinium, and you can kind of guess that's probably London. Milo is now all grown up and Kit Harington, and he's fighting as a gladiator. A group of slave owners are impressed by his fighting skills, so decide that he could fight somewhere better than just Londinium, and they take him over to Pompeii, where there is a much bigger amphitheatre. On this journey, where Milo and other slaves/gladiators are being taken from Londinium over to Pompeii, we come across a carriage. Within this carriage is our female lead, Cassia. Unsurprisingly, as happens in every romance film, they fall in love instantly as soon as they make eye contact, and they have this moment over her horse who is injured, and they somehow fall in love as he kills the horse to put it out of its misery. It's very bizarre, because nothing says I love you like death. It's weird. We then discover that she is the elite daughter of a governor named Severus. He's the governor of Pompeii. They are hoping that the Roman Emperor Titus will start to invest in Pompeii with building projects. During this talk with Cassia's family, they also hint at the political instability within the city of Rome at this time, and the fact that the outer provinces aren't exactly trusting of what's happening. Importantly, we later meet the character Corvus, who we discover was actually the man that killed young Milo's parents and is now senator, kind of acting on behalf of the emperor. And he's the one that's potentially going to invest in Pompeii. That evening is when the volcano starts to kick off a little bit, and one of their servants named Felix, who's out riding, actually just plummets down into the earth as it starts to crack and fall away. But nobody really knows that this has happened for a couple of days. Back with Milo, this is when we finally arrive at the amphitheatre, and he meets a fellow slave named Atticus. And Atticus is hoping to fight for his life so that he can get freedom. This is what I also just want to say, my amazing mummy skills, is that literally I will insert the clip and how quickly I knew that this was the guy from The Mummy Returns. It was insane. I'm usually really bad with faces, so I was pretty proud. That night, there is a party amongst the elites, and the gladiators are also brought there as kind of eye candy for the women. It's a little bit weird. We discover that the senator Corvus actually is in love with the woman Cassia, who does not reciprocate these feelings. So he attempts to kind of blackmail the family and say that if he has her hand in marriage, he will invest in Pompeii. With Milo and Cassia at this party, you can kind of predict where we're gonna go with this, and they meet eyes across a crowded room, and it's so romantic, and then there's a mini little earthquake and stuff starts to fall apart, and then the stables, you hear a lot of ruckus. Again, because Milo is from this famous Celtic horse tribe, he's very good with animals. So Cassia demands that he has to go in and help them, and they end up alone in the room together and run away. That lasts for all of 2 minutes before they get caught, and obviously Milo is punished, and Corvus is now out to kill him. So the next day at the gladiatorial games, they conspire against Milo and try and slaughter him and Atticus along with other slaves. However, they win this battle. Upset by this, Corvus threatens Cassia and her family by saying that if she does not wed him, he is going to kill them all. So she's pretty much stuck. Ultimately, none of that really matters though, because then Vesuvius erupts and everything starts to fall apart and everyone starts to die. We see massive crowds rushing to the port to try and escape, and eventually it becomes too crowded so people can't even flee. And then there is a mini little tidal wave as well as a result of the eruption. Despite all of this chaos going on, Corvus still wants Cassia and he will still chase her. But of course, Milo loves Cassia, so he's always going to defend her. And for the next half an hour is this kind of cat and mouse game of trying to save and chase Cassia. Eventually, Milo and Cassia are victorious and they leave Corvus chained to a chariot to die in the volcano eruption. Great! Our two main characters, they're in love, they're escaping, they're fine. No. They die. Because it's Mount Vesuvius, it's the eruption of Pompeii, they die. That's the end of the film, is death. And that is my brief summary. I hope my description of it did not corrupt your preconceptions. You may still enjoy it. You may have listened to that and thought, you know what, it sounds great, it sounds like a laugh. Maybe. I'm now going to try my best to work my way through the film chronologically to talk about some of the key points and if they're actually accurate to what happened. So the film starts in 62 CE in Roman Britain called Britannia. Point 1, yes, Roman Britain was called Britannia by the Romans. 2, it was actually occupied by the Romans at this time, so that's quite accurate. We know that Britain is kind of first encountered by Caesar in the 1st century BCE. It was then officially taken over by the Romans in around 43 CE. Their power in Roman Britain then doesn't really finish until about 410 CE. So what about this Celtic tribe revolt? How accurate is this? This is very accurate, that when Rome was taken over Britain around this time, that there were many revolts, because naturally if somebody comes to your country and then claims it, you're not going to be very happy with it. And this is actually around the time of Boudicca, which is probably a name you will have heard. The revolts led by Boudicca were actually about 60 to 61 CE, so just the year prior to when this is set. And unfortunately, some of these revolts were pretty brutal and pretty gory like we see in the film. The film then jumps 17 years forward and we're in Londinium. So firstly, yes, again, this is what the Romans called London. But what was happening to London in 79 CE? So that's like the maths of add 17 to 62. I did work that one out myself. Londinium was actually established around 47 to 50 CE, so it was a pretty prominent city at this time. And as I just mentioned, the revolts led by Boudicca, it was actually being rebuilt around this time to become a massive cosmopolitan city, and it was very important with Roman trade. And it continues to grow and flourish until about the 5th century CE. So everything's pretty accurate so far. When we meet Milo again, we realise that he has become a gladiator. And as I'm sure you know, gladiators were a very real thing. They were people that would fight for public entertainment. They'd fight men as well as beasts and animals being imported from abroad. In the film, we know that Milo was initially taken as a slave and then becomes a gladiator. And this is pretty accurate. A lot of the gladiators at the time were actually just slaves. And like Atticus, a lot of them were saying that they were going to fight for their freedom if they became popular enough and successful enough. At the amphitheatre in Londinium and then over in Pompeii, we see masses and masses of crowds gathering to watch these games, and this is accurate. They were very, very popular. So popular that some of the gladiators also became celebrities in and of themselves. We actually have evidence of graffiti of the names of popular gladiators and popular like slogans relating to them. Some women even purchased perfume relating to the gladiators, and this perfume was the gladiators' sweat. So yeah, pretty grim, very intense, popular celebrities. Over in Pompeii, we see the gladiators being underneath the amphitheatre, and this is very accurate. So for example, with the Colosseum, the underground area is called a hypogeum, and this describes a series of corridors and tunnels that would connect to each other and into the amphitheatre itself. These kind of acted as a waiting area, almost like cages for the slaves and for a lot of the animals they might be fighting that day. Finally, and most importantly, yes, there was an amphitheatre in Pompeii. It's actually one of ancient Rome's oldest examples that still survive, built around 70 BCE. So we're over in Pompeii and it is 79 CE. What's happening? The film accurately describes that Titus is the emperor of Rome at this time, and this is just following the year of the 4 emperors. The film has undertones of political instability within Rome and the fact that the emperors aren't always fully trusted. And this is quite reflective of the period with the 4 emperors, because naturally you shouldn't have 4 leaders in one year. There was a lot of suspicion and a lot of conspiracy, so they've accurately kind of reflected this. However, Titus's reign himself was pretty stable, if not short-lived. He is actually only emperor for about 2 years, so it didn't really give us much time to have any instability. The film also takes quite a clever approach to hint at the fact that Titus was actually the emperor to finally complete the Colosseum over in Rome. So they try and communicate this by the fact that he might be investing in other buildings across the provinces. However, there is no evidence that he was planning to do this in Pompeii. But the film also kind of suggests that that is the case because it's Corvus that's thinking of investing in it, not Titus. And Corvus never successfully invested in this or even sealed the deal, so why would there be a record of it? So on the topic of this evil character, let's talk a little bit about him. His full name is Marcus Valerius Corvus, and this is actually the name of a Roman political figure, so they haven't invented that. However, the real figure was way back in history compared to 79 CE. The real man actually lived from around 370 to 270 BCE, and he isn't a bad guy. He was actually a very successful political and military leader. So I guess they just needed a name from somewhere, and why not? Unfortunately, there is truth behind this idea of a political marriage and the idea that the girl would be forced into it just to form some sort of political alliance. Generally, in ancient Rome, marriage amongst the elite was not for love. It was for want of forming a bond and union between you and another elite family. A key example of this would be the fact that Caesar's daughter Julia was actually married off to Pompey around the time of the first triumvirate. And this was just to solidify this bond and this political union, rather than to actually say that his daughter was in love with this man that was a lot older than her. Finally, and probably most importantly, let's talk about the eruption of Vesuvius in Pompeii. Yes, the film accurately states that this happens in 79 CE. The film also starts with a long description of the eruption from Pliny the Elder. And this is a very real account, and he's actually the only surviving account that we have from this period, Pliny being one of the few survivors that managed to escape the eruption. This is most likely because he was on the other side of the Bay of Naples, not in Pompeii itself. The actual time span of the film, again, is pretty accurate. The eruption lasted for around 2 days, but then obviously if you know anything about an eruption, you will have tremors leading up to it weeks, months, years in advance. And the mini tidal wave that, I say mini, it wasn't mini, it was pretty big, but there was actually a tidal wave at the event as a result of the eruption. And quite upsettingly, the way that they depict people fleeing to the ports, we know that they did attempt to do this because we see a large cluster of the bodies around this area as a result. If you've been to a museum where it has anything from the eruption of Vesuvius, you will know that the way they choose to show the bodies in the film is pretty accurate to what they look like as a result of this eruption. And the fact that they choose to show the two characters kissing at the end of the film, and that's what their bodies remain like, is inspired by a very true couple. So there was a couple from Pompeii that were kind of preserved together in embrace. And we've recently discovered actually that this was two men. And it's quite heartwarming and upsetting all at the same time that we have this couple preserved for eternity in this final embrace, and I think that's kind of what the film was inspired by. And with that, that's where I must give the film credit, because I understand what they were attempting to do. When we look at historical events like this, it's very easy to dehumanize the victims of such an event because it happened thousands of years ago. We feel very detached from it. But it's refreshing to be reminded, if not upsetting, that these were very real people that were living real lives together that were suddenly just cut short. So yeah, it may not have been the best film, but it does achieve these moments of closure at points in time where you do feel very upset and attached to these characters that you always know are gonna die. I think that's everything we're gonna have time for today, so thank you for watching and I'll see you next week. Bye!